Hi guys, it's Aoife here from Words of Clover, and I recently went to see Six the Musical when it came to Dublin, and it has basically been all I have been able to listen to, all I've been able to think about since I saw it. I'm already looking forward to whenever I'll be able to see it again, and I kind of wanted to do a book video that was based some way around the idea of what Six the Musical is about. I've never heard of Six the Musical. It is a very fun kind of musical performance, which is basically where the six queens of Henry VIII come together and form this type of kind of like girl group, and the whole show is all about each of the queens singing her song, which is kind of all about her experience being married to King Henry VIII and what he did to them and how he treated them, and they're kind of doing a little bit of a battle about who was the worst treated in the end. But it's really like this really great I felt like it was just this really great performance, this really great like moment where it acknowledged women in history who I feel like are so often overlooked. But I just loved the way this show educated people who might never have heard about it before, or even looked like much further into it before. And yeah, it's just a really great moment of recognizing women in history, but also giving these women back their voice and back their own lease of life. Like if these things hadn't have happened to them, like what else could they have done if they lived in a more modern world? What amazing things could they have done? And yeah, it's really just about like female empowerment, kind of like female friendship as well, and yeah, just sticking it to the man basically, and just doing your own thing. So I wanted to talk about some books that I feel like if you like kind of the themes around Six the Musical, you may like these books, whether it's because of the time period it's set in or the type of female empowerment, like a woman doing her own thing theme that is in the books. So the first book I want to talk about is The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. This is a Regency romance book. This is actually a female-female romance as well in this book, which also makes it extra special. And in this, we are following a young woman who is really, really into astronomy, and she like her big thing in life is that she wants to study the stars and she wants to kind of see if she can make a future out of this. But because of the time period that she is living in, she's really stopped by so many things, obstacles, the patriarchy, societal expectations upon women to do what she actually wants to do and what she's really, really good at. And we see her like struggle and come against blocks again and again and again as she tries to pursue her passion, and she's really starting to feel really down about it, and she feels like she is never going to be able to do what she wants to do. And then she ends up getting kind of a sponsor patron in this older lady who is, I think she is widowed, and she kind of has her own house, she has her own money, and she brings this woman into her home to kind of help her do what she needs to do. And the two of them get really, really close, and like this really strong, at first it's a friendship that forms and eventually leads to romance, and this really great sexual exploration being explored in this book, as well as the book being about just this really great story of a really clever woman at a time when women weren't really encouraged to be clever or encouraged to be out there or to be academic in any way. And we also see how she has to battle against men every step of the way, and but she keeps trying, and she keeps trying to strive for greatness, that the greatness that she knows she will be able to achieve. And I would definitely recommend it for people to read, especially if you are looking for Regency romance that is a little bit different to the normal Regency romance Bridgerton style books that you normally see. Another book I want to talk about that really focuses on a woman pursuing her passion is Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. I've talked about this book before, and yet I still have only read the first book in the series. I really, really need to continue on with the series because I really, really love it. This book is about a woman called Lady Trent who wants to study dragons. Dragons, again, are her big love in life. She is so fascinated by them ever since she was a small child. But she's always been told that her kind of job in life is to marry well. This is kind of an alternate Edwardian English society that we're following. And we are following this at the start, where it's kind of almost like a look back at Lady Trent's diaries or her life. In a way, we know that she's gone on to become this really amazing kind of dragon naturalist, and she's really well revered in this world. But we know when she started off, she had to really fight for her place in this world and on these trips. And she eventually marries this man who really actually encourages her, and they kind of have a shared love of dragons and a shared love of knowledge around dragons, and the two of them go on this trip together. And this book is about that trip and also about their relationship and their marriage and different ups and downs in Lady Trent's life. We see her deal with some different things within her marriage and within her own her personal life, as well as all the kind of adventures she goes on and when she goes to study the dragons. And again, I think this is just a great book around female empowerment, a woman doing what she wants to do, highlighting how amazing and clever women are as well. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book, and talking about it now really is making me get a foot up my bum to read the next book. The next book I want to talk about is actually historical fiction. It's probably closer really to what Six the Musical is kind of based on. The book I want to talk about is Cecily, and this is actually a book that predates the Tudor times by a little bit. And was the mother of King Edward IV, I think it was, who ascended the throne after this kind of like a civil war, and he was king for quite a number of years, and then he eventually was, when he died, the throne was then taken over by Richard III, and then went on then to King Henry VII, who became the father of King Henry VIII. So there are connections there to six. But we are talking, when we are following this, we are following Cecily kind of growing up her entire life. This is quite a slow burn book. It's a real it's real historical fiction, and you're getting so much information around the time of around kind of the Civil War, around the Cousins' War, the War of the Roses, and we are seeing the struggles again and again and again for Cecily and her husband. And Cecily's kind of like life as a woman, she's always kind of on the outside a little bit. But in this book, what I really liked was, I feel like you really get deep into her marriage with her husband Richard. You see how she was a part of almost like the war room in a way. She was almost like an advisor to Richard in many ways. She really, like in the book, she which obviously I'm sure the author played a lot around what she fictionally in terms of what Cecily may have actually been able to do. But um I really loved how she portrayed Cecily in this book, and she's not necessarily a particularly nice character. She's quite hard at times and cold, can be a little bit cold towards her children as well. And she really almost in a way kind of resents her lot in life as a woman. She would much rather probably be a man, where she could have a lot more control over her life, which, to be fair, I don't think I would blame her for that either. We see her scheming a lot in this book to for her husband and her children to succeed in what they are trying to do. And then we just see how things twist and turn in different ways, the tide of war, and how history remembers her. In the fictional books that I've read before around this time, she was always this very kind of she was always this figure in the background. It's almost like dark, cold, calculating figure that was always in the background, with always kind of like an unkind word, or she was never really portrayed as a particularly nice person in any book that I've ever read where she's been in, but she's always been a person in the background. So I really enjoyed seeing her being the main character in her own book and kind of learning a little bit more about her. So if you like historical fiction, I would recommend it. It's a little bit of more of a slower historical fiction, but I really enjoyed it and I would quite recommend it. Another historical fiction book that I really, really enjoy is The Summer Queen by Elizabeth Chadwick. Elizabeth Chadwick is one of my favourite historical fiction writers, and if you are enjoying Alison Weir, who has written a bunch of books about the wives of Henry VIII, and also Philippa Gregory, who's written similar, I would also really recommend Elizabeth Chadwick, because she is similar to those two, where she takes women's stories in history and she kind of gives them a voice and gives them this really compelling narrative, and kind of teaches the reader in different ways about these amazing women in history that we might not know much about either. This story goes back even further than Cecily and the Cousins' War, way back to the time of Richard the Lionheart, and we are following his mother, who is Eleanor de Aquitaine, and she was a really, really interesting person in history. She was a real firehouse, really knew her worth, and she did a lot of things that, for the time that she was living in, I feel like was really groundbreaking in many, many ways. She was originally married to one of the kings of France, and she never gave him any sons. I think they only had two daughters, and she eventually ended up divorcing him, or annulling the marriage, I think, because of the lack of sons. And then she went on to marry someone who would then become the King of England, and she gave him a bunch of sons and a bunch of other children. We see her have a really kind of love-hate, more veering on hate relationship eventually with her second husband, and is a very, very fiery, but the three books in this series kind of take place throughout her life. So The Summer Queen, we're seeing her first marriage, and then kind of leading into her second marriage, and then the second book we are seeing, which is the Winter Queen, we're seeing her second marriage and how it kind of all starts to crumble apart. And in the third book, The Autumn Throne, we are seeing really how the end of her life kind of came about, her sons as they grew up and as they again became king, how they have relationships with her, and we just see how she was just this really, really strong person throughout history, and she had a really strong influence in both her husband's reign and Oliver's son's reign, and how she outlived like so many of them. And she's just a really inspiring person, I think, in English history. And I think if you want to learn more about really amazing women, she's definitely someone to look at. Because yeah, I just really loved this book and learning more about her. And I feel if you like learning about the Queens and Six, want you may like to learn about this queen who many people might not know about. And then for books, if we're going to just talk about the theme of female friendship, of sisterhood, and maybe a little bit of magic, which we do know was a little bit of a thing with King Henry VIII. He accused Anne Boleyn of being a witch, and of like he kind of, blamed the women of witchcraft because he couldn't keep it in his pants basically. And so the witchcraft is a little bit of a thing in Six, where some of the women are talking about how they were accused of it, particularly Anne Boleyn. But if we were talking about kind of, again, female friendship, sisterhood, and magic all in one, there's a couple of books I wanted to talk about. One of them is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, and I just wanted to include this because of the sisterhood vibes, I think, in it. And again, women kind of coming together to combat just like a really shithead of a guy. And I really love the movie of this. I think the book is really good, but the movie, it's one of those weird things where sometimes I wonder if the movie is a little bit better or a little bit more nostalgic in certain ways, but they're both really, really good. But I would definitely recommend this for someone who maybe wants something fun, something magical, something witchy, and it's something where women come together to defeat a big bad guy. And then the last book I want to recommend is more of an author than a book, but I wanted to recommend Louisa Morgan, who has written two books that I have read, which is The Secret History of Witches and The Age of Witches. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about these books were because, again, I think they just have such a really amazing theme of powerful women, women empowerment, female friendship, sisterhood, all of those different things that I love in Six. And I think Louisa Morgan's books just really, really have all of these elements in them. The Secret History of Witches is very much a multi-generational story where we're following a group of, like, a family of women who we are following kind of generation after generation, and we see them have these kind of more witchy powers. And I really love the witchcraft in these books as well, because it's more like hedge witch rather than, sparks and wands and stuff like that. It's very much like, herbology and the moon and kind of different rituals like that, more so than fireworks. And I really love that type of magic, and I really love seeing it in books. And this one wheels up really, really well, and we see how we're basically just following the women through each like decade and through centuries. And we are seeing this line of women, and we see the different types of things that they face. We see the type of women each one's are. Most of them are really good, a couple of them aren't so good, but we also see how they are hunted for being just who they are again and again and again, and how this makes their lives like come into danger so many different times, and they have to flee or hide or do particular things they might not want to do just to keep themselves safe. And I really, really enjoyed this. And The Age of Witches takes place much later on. I think this play takes place maybe in the early 1900s or sometime in the 1900s, from what I can remember. And we are following a young woman who is looked after by her aunt, from what I can remember. And we again are just seeing different elements of witchcraft. We are seeing like an older woman who's really honed in on her craft and really knows her stuff, and then a younger woman who isn't as knowledgeable about what she may be able to do. And I really loved the contrast in that, how kind of the bad effects of magic as well, and how people can use their magic in some bad ways too. But again, it is about women coming together, and again, women kind of finding their inner power in many different ways, which I really, really loved reading about. So yeah, those are some of the books that I decided to recommend based on Six the Musical. Some of them are a lot more like, I guess, closer in theme to Six than some of them are a little bit more vague. But yeah, I do think these all fit in some way. So yeah, I would love to know what you guys think, if you guys have read any of these books, if you guys would recommend any books for me based on my newfound love for Six. I would really love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time.